Hello everyone, Rurikhan here with TGN, and today I'm going to be bringing you a Scoundrel Scrapper guide. So before I actually begin the guide itself, I'd like to give everyone like a brief explanation of the class, because several of the classes in SWTOR are, the names don't really tell you exactly what the class is all about, and sometimes not even the description. I mean, you could be surprised once you know what the Scoundrel is actually about, or not. Just throwing that out there, because a lot of people are actually starting out this MMO as their first MMO, so because of that I don't like to over-assume things. So I like to go over explanations of things that sometimes might be considered extremely obvious or something, but to some people they might not get it. That's why I'm going to give you guys a little bit of more detail into this guide. So regarding class overview, when you think of smuggler, you most likely take on to the idea of the gunslinger or whatever, but that's not all that it's about. As a matter of fact, the Scoundrel is a completely different class from the gunslinger in my opinion. So as a Scoundrel, how exactly does it work? So a Scoundrel is actually more of a rogue type of class, and as a matter of fact, a lot of your attacks are melee attacks. And you might be wondering, whoa, melee attacks? Isn't the class kind of frail? Yeah, he is kind of frail, but he can still last enough to do his damage and bail out. He's got a lot of escape abilities and all that kind of stuff. It's basically like a rogue, okay? Think of the Scoundrel as a rogue. Of course, he also has his healer tree, at which point he becomes basically a healer. He has a whole bunch of heals and regenerates and whatever, but I'm not going to talk about the healer tree in this episode, nor am I going to talk about the dirty tricks tree or dirty fighting, because dirty fighting is shared with the gunslinger, and later on I might do a version of the guide for this particular tree, but for now we're going to be focusing here on the scraper tree. So let's move on to the skill tree and which talents you should get or not get as a scrapper scoundrel. I got bedside manner, increases your total cunning by 9%. Why is this important? Cunning is your main stat as a scoundrel, therefore the more cunning you have, the more damage you're going to be dealing, which makes this a pretty big deal talent. Next up, you got element of surprise, which is going to increase the critical hit of your back blast and shoot first by 16%. Now, we're going to go over shoot first, despite the fact I still don't have the skill here. I've already seen what it does, so I kind of understand how it fits into the rotation of the Scoundrel and all that type of stuff. So we will go over it, but for now, you will just, like, if you're lower level and you want to take this down, you'll be taking it because of back blast, which is also extremely important. To Black Bass, we have also Browbeater, which increases the damage dealt by Vital Shot and Flechette Round by 9%. Still haven't gotten Flechette Round, but basically you need to select 2 skills in order to proceed up through the skill tree. And the other skill that you're going to get here is a skill that increases all healing done by 1% and all healing received by 3%, which I don't really find incredibly useful for a DPS class. I mean, sure, it could be useful maybe in a PvP environment, but I'm focusing more on dishing out as much damage as you can, glass cannon style, okay? Next up, we have No Holds Barred, increases ranged and tech critical chance by 6%. Shouldn't have to explain this one, pretty self-explanatory. Increases your crit, which you always want some of that, and Holdout Defense, increases damage dealt by Blaster Whip by 10%. And now you're wondering, whoa, Blaster Whip? Yeah, Blaster Whip, because like I said, this pretty much is a melee class, and Blaster Whip is basically a main skill for a Scoundrel Scrapper, and you will see why in a couple of minutes. So these are like the major DPS increasing talents that you can get early on. So most likely you will just get these before you even climb up the tree for the Scrapper. That's my opinion anyways. Next up, we have Scrappy, increases damage dealt by Blaster Whip, Quick Shot, and Back Blast. So Blaster Whip is, like I said, a very key skill to get as a Scoundrel, therefore you're going to be needing it, so just get it. Back Blast, also an extremely important skill, and Quick Shot is like your filler shot for when all your other stuff is on cooldown. You're going to be using Quick Shot, so that's important as well. Next up I got Sneaky. I mean, whatever you get in this tree is mostly up to personal preference. Just get whatever you want to go up the tree. I personally like moving faster, so I go for the moving faster. Like I've mentioned before, I am a glass tank, so I'm a glass cannon, so I'm not really going to get survival talents, survival skills, sorry, because this is a skill tree, not a talent tree, okay? Next up, you want to get Sucker Punch as fast as possible, because Sucker Punch is just a really cool skill. I really love Sucker Punch. And after that, you want to get the Flying Fists, because it will get your Sucker Punch the chance to proc another punch. And trust me, it's a really cool animation when the guy goes, 2 punches in the face. It's kind of cool. You guys might be thinking, whoa, going around punching people, I mean, it doesn't make sense. Star Wars, come on, blasters, machine guns, assault cannons, screw all that. Force powers, psh, who cares? Fists. This is how a scoundrel fights. He punches people in the face. I mean, just throwing that out there. He punches droids, okay? He kicks droids. That's all I'm saying. It's like, oh, I'm a Jedi, I'm gonna use my force, you know, throw droids away. Screw that. I'm gonna punch that droid in the face and I'm gonna tear it down. I'm going to kick it out of my way and cheap shot it if necessary, depending on the target's enemy level, of course, which is quite unfortunate. Hey, Corso, why don't you go ahead, get me another one of them lockboxes. You guys might be wondering, oh, you're doing slicing. Yes, but this is post-nerf. So slicing took a big nerf, and I'm actually happy about it, but I'm not going to address slicing here. Next up, you have a couple more skills that you can select. I would go for the surprise comeback, which basically makes a skill that we're going to be talking about in a couple of minutes called Pugnancy. It makes it give you health back. So this is the only survival skill I took, and this is because I use Pugnancy quite a lot when you're in long, drawn-out fights. Pugnancy comes quite in handy, and sometimes it can actually save your life if you get this skill. So it's just 1 skill point, and this will basically cause your Pugnancy to regenerate 30% of your health over a couple of seconds, over 45 seconds or whatever is the duration of Pugnancy. So over 45 seconds, you'll actually regenerate 30% of your health just for 1 skill point. So to me, this is a no-brainer. Next up, I got the Sawed Off because it's going to reduce the energy cost of Back Blast, which obviously allows me to cast Back Blast more often without running into energy issues. And it also reduces the cost of Flechette Round, which I still don't know exactly how it works. We'll have to see about that in the future. So this is my skill tree choice. I'm currently level 32, despite the fact I'm going to be covering a lot of skills that are not level 30. Well, not a lot of skills, a couple of skills that are not achievable by level 32, just to give you guys a better idea of how the class works. One of the skills that I can't really describe to you is going to be Flechette Round, because I know how it works kind of, but I still don't know exactly how I'm going to stick it into my rotation, so I still have to figure that out. But for now, this should give you a pretty strong basis on how to DPS as a Scoundrel. So let's get started, because I mean the video has been on for 9 minutes and we have only really just theorycraft about the skill tree. Let's talk about abilities themselves. So I separated this into 3 groups. So it's going to be primary DPS abilities, secondary DPS abilities, and utility abilities. So starting right up with your primary DPS abilities, the first thing I want to address is Upper Hand. Upper Hand is probably the most important mechanic in the Smuggler because it unlocks a lot of your skills. Upper Hand unlocks skills like Sucker Punch, like Pugnancy, and I mean, also Blaster Volley, I believe. I don't know them all by head, but I'm going to be speaking about them as we go along. But basically the thing is, Upper Hand is what dictates how you function as a Scoundrel. So it is an extremely, actually as a Smuggler, because I believe it's a Smuggler skill if I'm not mistaken, or am I? Let me just double check on that. Where is the Upper Hand? No, it is a Scoundrel only skill, so you only have to worry about it from a Scoundrel's perspective, not a gunslinger. So, going after the Upper Hand mechanic, how does it work? Defeating an opponent or activating Blaster Whip or Shoot First grants the Upper Hand, increasing all damage dealt by 2% and enabling the use of exploits for 10 seconds. Up to 2 charges of upper hand can exist at once. Okay, so this right here already like complicates your DPS rotation a bit, and I'm not going to give you the perfect end-all be-all rotation. I'm going to give you my opinion of what it is. I doubt that anyone has like the best Scoundrel guide in the world at this point. I mean, the game's been out for what, 9 days? If we take another week because of the early release or whatever, but still, I doubt that people have like got this all nailed down, and I doubt that people already completely know everything there is to know about the Scoundrel. I may be wrong, but whatever, it's just my opinion. So how are we going to be using upper hand? So for starters, now that you know what upper hand is, let's talk about abilities. Starting up with stealth. So the Scoundrel gets a stealth, just like a rogue, like I've said. It also stealths your companions, so don't worry about, you know, your companions dying because they can't stealth or whatever. But stealth basically puts you stealth, which is the same deal as any other MMO that has stealth. You basically go around and you're completely invisible to everyone else that can't detect you. If you get too close, you'll usually get a warning indicating that they're about to detect you. As you can see there, they detected me, but I'm gonna bail out. There we go. Whoa, still took damage there, bastards. Oh, they're gonna kill my companion. Well, this is awfully a bad start. I was expecting them to warn before detecting me, but fine. We'll just display a couple of scoundrelism right here. Nose, they killed the droid. How dare you? How dare you, sir? How dare you? I was not ready for that engagement at all. Oh well, let's get our droid back up. Where are you? I just wanted droid to be here to kind of heal me, but of course he had to mess things up for me and completely destroy my guide. Stupid droid. Okay, like I said, that's how stealth mechanic works. However, for skills like shoot first and another skill that we're going to see later on, which is tranquilizer, you're actually required to be in stealth to perform those skills. So therefore it is not just something for you to be invisible and be running around like an idiot. You also have to actually plan this ahead as to how to engage your enemies. Let's see. Okay, so after stealth, I want to talk about shoot first. So what is shoot first? Shoot first is basically the same thing as this skill that you see right here, backblast, which fires the scattergun point blank into the target's backside, dealing X amount of damage, and you must be behind target to use it. So shoot first does a little bit more damage than backblast, and it has to be done from stealth. It also causes the upper hand effect, which is why you should always start every single fight as possible. As soon as you get shoot first, it should always be your first ability to be used. I mean, the name shoot first itself says everything you need to know. While we don't have shoot first, we're going to be using backblast in our demonstrations, okay? So what is backblast? Same thing. It's basically a backstab from a rogue, okay? You go up behind the target and you stab him in the back, except instead of stabbing him in the back, stabbing him in the back, you shoot him in the ass with a shotgun. Okay, and that is just, I mean, the animation itself, I love it. The guy just pulls out a shotgun with his left hand and boom, shoots the enemies from the behind, and it's just a really cool animation. Okay. So, besides backblast, what else do we have? Blaster whip. Remember what I said about blaster whip? Blaster whip also causes your upper hand effect. An upper hand effect can stack twice, which means that it will allow you to use 2 exploits, and it will also be increasing your damage by 4% while you have 2 stacks of upper hand. So blaster whip is basically a melee strike. You smack your target with your blaster. Deals a whole bunch of damage. It deals a lot more damage than you'd think, considering that it's just a blaster whip. It's the same thing as a pistol whip. You guys have seen it in movies. You just bitch slap someone with a handgun. It's the same thing in here. But obviously, as a scoundrel, it also unlocks your other abilities, the exploits that we're going to be mentioning in a couple of seconds. So one of the exploits is Pugnancy. What does Pugnancy do? It exploits your upper hand to recover 3 energy every 3 seconds for 45 seconds. So it's going to increase your energy regeneration. And why is this important? Because on long drawn out fights, you will basically run out of energy. And the thing about Scoundrel and Smuggler energy, actually, is that the more energy you have, the faster it regenerates. The less energy you have, the slower it regenerates. So if you are going to be in a long fight, like let's say a boss fight or something like that, this is going to be the first thing that you're going to want to exploit with your upper hand. Just as soon as you get into the boss range, whatever, you get your upper hand either by shoot first or by blaster whip. Boom, pop Pugnancy immediately for long drawn out fights. Remember, for long drawn out fights, if you're clearing out trash, like let's say just normal, you know, the very first grade of enemies above the normal enemies, I think they're called standard or whatever. It is the enemy that has the silver icon next to their names. Those enemies, sometimes you don't really need to get Pugnancy, because I mean they're usually dead so fast you might as well just go for a sucker punch combo and see if you can just take them out as faster before you actually get into trouble. Also remember that if you're losing life really fast in a boss fight, regardless of your energy levels, if you took that skill from the skill tree that I've mentioned, which makes Pugnancy heal you for 30% of your health throughout the duration of 45 seconds, you obviously might want to use Pugnancy for that as well. So after Pugnancy, like I've been mentioning, we also have Sucker Punch. So what does Sucker Punch do? It gives a punch on the enemies, and if you get the improved version on the skills, which you will obviously want to get, it might trigger an additional punch. And besides triggering the additional punch, basically what it does is like you Sucker Punch, and if you Sucker Punch him once, you get to have the effect Flying Fists. And what Flying Fist does is Sucker Punch has a 50% chance to trigger Flying Fists, dealing an additional X damage, in this case 169. This effect cannot occur more than once every 10 seconds. Standard and weak targets are additionally stunned by Flying Fists. And eventually you get something else, which is Flying Fist has a 50% chance to immediately regrant upper hand when hitting a bleeding target, which will work perfectly with another skill that we're going to be mentioning in a couple of seconds. But basically what happens is if you regrant yourself upper hand, you're going to be wanting to Sucker Punch again. You know what I mean? So you get like 2 Sucker Punches in a row, which is kind of cool. Increases your DPS, you know, that kind of stuff. After Sucker Punch, what else do we have? We got Cheap Shot. So what is Cheap Shot? As the name indicates, Cheap Shot is something that deals damage to a vulnerable target. Unfortunately, this is not usable on targets which have the gold icon or superior. Here's the thing, there's 3 types of targets. There are actually 4. There's like the normal targets, then there's those targets which have a silver star next to their name. Those would be the first above the norm enemies. They are pretty easy to kill as well. They're not that tough. Then there's the golden targets, which are usually tougher. And then there's the champion targets, which is like a mesh of gold and white stars, whatever. You'll pretty much recognize them when you see them. Cheap Shot will only work on regular enemies and the enemies with the silver on their names. Gold and the champion status, you can't use Cheap Shot on them. And if you can, please correct me, but I have not been able to. I've tried a whole bunch of times, and that's why it says here that it only works on strong targets, weak and standard targets. Okay, so that's Cheap Shot. Cheap Shot basically does a whole bunch of damage, has a high cooldown. If you are able to disable one of those mobs, you can basically Cheap Shot them. It also probably works on players, I believe. I don't do a whole lot of PvP, but it could be extremely useful for players. Since you have a stun, you basically stun them and you go up to them and Cheap Shot them. So it's a pretty simple thing. You can also use flash grenades to exploit that. We'll talk about flash grenades in a second as well. So we've talked about stealth, shoot first, back blast, blaster whip, pugnancy, sucker punch, cheap shot, and right now we're going to be talking about quick shot. What is quick shot? Quick shot is your filler shot, because everything you do as a scrapper, at least most of the things that really matter, that really deal damage, they have a really high, well, not an incredibly high cooldown, but it's a 6-second cooldown, so you can't really spam 6 seconds. Back blast has a 9-second cooldown. You can't really spam all of these abilities. And since you can't spam them, there will be times where you will have a hole where you can't really use your high damaging abilities. And what you do at those times is you either regenerate your Vital Shot, which I will speak about Vital Shot in a couple of seconds, or you will actually have to go ahead and shoot a Quick Shot. Quick Shot is basically exactly what the name implies. You shoot an enemy and that's it. You shoot him once. It's just a filler shot. It makes quite a useful, quite a decent amount of damage. So again, like I said, it's a filler shot. Whenever you can't do anything else, do Quick Shot. After Quick Shot, let's talk about Vital Shot. What does Vital Shot do? It fires a shot at the target to bleed. Fires a shot that causes the target to bleed, dealing 731 internal damage per over 15 seconds. So this is a dot, obviously, which for those of you who do not know, it is a damage over time shot. And it makes your enemies bleed, and like I said, it combos very nicely with round 2, which is a skill that you're going to get after you get maximum Flying Fists, which, like I've mentioned earlier, Flying Fist has a 50% chance to immediately grant upper hand when hitting a bleeding target. So in those long drawn out fights, because again, it's not really worth it to just keep your dots on a weak enemy and make sure that you do everything right. I mean, on weak enemies, just do whatever you want. At least up until the level that I've been to, it's not a big deal. Just go up to them, back blast them, and straight up go to Blaster Whip, you go to Sucker Punch. You know, just do your melee abilities and just own their faces and just whatever. But for bosses, it's important. Keep that Vital Shot up because you want to keep the boss bleeding. And since the boss is bleeding, you'll also get a chance that when you get your Flying Fist, you get your upper hand regranted, which obviously means that you can chain it into another Sucker Punch. Sorry about that, just commenting really hardcore here, but there. That's Vital Shot. It's a pretty decent dot, pretty sweet. Next up, we have for AoE. You have 3 things for AoE. One of them is the Thermal Grenade, which you've seen me use earlier. Thermal Grenade is basically when you're in an AoE situation, you just want to use it whenever it comes off cooldown. It's got a 6-second cooldown, so obviously can't be the only thing you use in an AoE situation. So when you're in an AoE situation, you want to also use your Blaster Whip to get your upper hand and move on to Blaster Volley, which will fire a blaster in a burst. It hits up 5 targets, 10-meter cone in front of you for 563 to 647. So it consumes your upper hand, but it is another AoE skill. This skill will probably get reworked because I don't really think that this skill is functioning the proper way it's meant to be, because you need a target, but it doesn't make sense because it's a frontal cone ability. So even if you target something and you shoot the opposite way, it still seems to work. So I don't really understand why they don't just remove the target restriction and just let you shoot whatever it's in front of you, because that would make a lot more sense than forcing you to select the target. It doesn't make much sense if they force you to select the target for this skill, in my opinion. But it is your other AoE ability. And then comes the mother of all AoE abilities that you're ever going to have, which you will get this at level 50, and it is one of the best animations I've seen so far in the game, which is the XS Freighter Flyby. So for those of you who play a smuggler, XS Freighter might seem familiar, and that is because it is your ship. So basically what happens is you channel a spell for, I believe, either 3 or 6 seconds, I'm not exactly sure. And as you channel that spell, your spaceship will actually come from the sky and do an orbital bombardment on top of your enemies. And he also does a barrel roll, just for awesomeness. So yeah, that is your primary DPS ability. So right now, let's show you guys a couple of those. Let me just see, is Bodar back? He's going to be back in a minute. But let me just show you. So for the start of a fight, what you want to do is you want to come up behind your enemies really fast and just start spamming your back blast. After that, you want to do your Sucker Punch. Since this is an AoE situation, I'm going to go ahead and do a little Blaster Volley. Going to throw my grenade as well. There goes another one. Going to use my Sucker Punch again. Actually, just used Pungency there. Sucker Punch again, and now... No, that was actually Blaster Whip, and then it was a Sucker Punch, as you can see. Blaster Whip, Sucker Punch. That was with a Flying Fist, as you can see, because it was 2 punches. Whenever it does 2 punches, it's a Flying Fist. Once again, this guy is getting away. Blaster Whip, Sucker Punch. This is kind of how you would handle a group type situation. Now let's see a tougher enemy. We have a little full commando here, so let's go ahead and try to give him our full rotation. So starting right up, whoa. Is he allied with those guys? I hope they don't all pull, but if they do, we have our escape ability anyways, doesn't mind. Oh, SWTOR's here. Okay, so it's time to get rid of this droid, because this droid is just annoying. And you can't really heal that much anyway, so it doesn't make much sense. So why don't you go ahead, fetch me a box of money, and goodbye. Now, SWTOR is one of my favorite companions. He's the Wookiee guy, and he's just beast mode all around. So what you want to do, starting up a fight with a tougher enemy, is you want to go ahead, you want to go behind him, start up with your back blast, sucker punch, get your pugnancy going, vital shot, as you could see there, and now you can go either with an auto attack or your quick shot. As you can see, the cooldown is out on blaster whip, so go blaster whip and then your sucker punch, and down he goes. That was like full on the full single target DPS. Let me show it to you guys again. Back blast, sucker punch, pugnancy, but I still don't have it actually, but it's okay, it's still active. So sucker punch again, quick shot, blaster whip, sucker punch, quick shot, and then you would do back blast because back blast was off cooldown. It's all about looking at your cooldowns. Is blaster whip off cooldown? Use that. Is back blast off cooldown? Use that. If they're not off cooldown, go ahead and use your quick shot. Once you use your blaster whip, make sure you follow up with either a sucker punch or your pugnancy. And this is kind of how this class works. It works a lot with being up close range, up and close with your enemies. It does not work like the Gunslinger. The Gunslinger is a ranged class. This is not a ranged class at all, as you can see. And also, you can, with this class, in my opinion, you should never really try to tank enemies. You need a companion, or you need to be playing with someone that takes aggro away from you, because you need to stay behind your target to take the maximum, to take as much advantage as you possibly can from your back blast. Also remember that if I already had shoot first, my first skill would not be back blast. It would be shoot first, and then I would resume to using back blast as fast as possible. So let's say I would come here, shoot first, then I would have upper hand. But since I can't, I go ahead and I do blaster whip, get my pugnancy, make sure to use your vital shot, and then blaster whip once again, sucker punch. You can even throw a grenade in there if you want, because there's an enemy in range. Once again, what's off cooldown? Blaster whip. Boom, down he goes. Same thing, you just got to keep that rotation going. On this one, just get that shotgun blast to the face. So, if you look in the description of the Scoundrel, a lot of times they tell you, oh, the Scoundrel's the guy who walks around with a shotgun. Not really. Your shotgun is only used in skills. There's actually a physical slot for your shotgun, as you can see over here. But you can actually only use it for stuff like back blast and shoot first. Those are the only two skills that I've actually ever seen use. Those are actually the only two skills that I've actually. Those are the only two skills I've ever seen use the shotgun. Haven't seen it used for anything else. Now, you guys might be wondering, what about that cheap shot skill you were talking about? Right, here it is. I'm going to stun this guy, and here's your cheap shot. That's a cheap shot. Then you can open up with another blaster whip, sucker punch. Too many enemies, so go ahead and throw a thermal grenade. As you can see in here, we could also use the blaster volley, but just use the quick shot and down he goes. Another blaster whip, and there we go. So this is the style of play for the Scoundrel. So remember, basic rotation for maximum DPS possible. Shoot first. After shoot first, you go for you already have your upper hand, so go for pugnancy. After pugnancy, make sure that you go for your blaster whip, then take your sucker punch, and somewhere between there do a vital shot. It's a complex rotation because there's no macros in this game yet, and I actually like it that way. I would actually like to keep it that way, because I mean, macros could actually make it quite simple. You could almost just stick both Blaster Whip, Back Blast, and a whole bunch of other abilities in a macro and just spam that all day long, and that wouldn't make any sense in my opinion. So I hope they stick to it as it is. Macros are not really necessary because it's basically the type of game you don't have the skills to pay the bills. Too bad, bro.